So the Houston Firefighters Relief and Retirement Fund is investing in Bitcoin and Ether. They invested $25 million into both crypto assets. They did not disclose how much they split between the two assets. That fund holds over $4 billion for 6,600 active members, both retired and active members of the firefighter community in that area. This kind of hits on some of the headlines we hit on earlier in the year, with a lot of firms investing and allocating Bitcoin or investing funds to Bitcoin and Ethereum. We saw like Tesla jump into it. I saw a few bigger firms go into it. Also some insurance funds like Mass Mutual jump into it as well. So this is kind of returning to those earlier spring vibes we got with this announcement. $25 million isn't a ton, but it is notable because Bitcoin is price rising again. And so anyone's guess kind of why Bitcoin's price is rising again after it suffers so many setbacks this summer. So Zach, I'm going to throw this one to you to start off the conversation. Are we going to see more firms just investing into Bitcoin and Ethereum just as a different allocation for their investments?
I think so. I mean, we've seen it with like CalPERS. I forget the vehicle that they did it through, which is like the big sort of like public employee pension in California. We've seen it with a couple of smaller ones in Northern Virginia, and I think in Arlington, like a couple of years back. So I bet there's more of these out here than we are fully aware of, and it seems like something that makes sense. Some of the thing to note here is that, and I don't know the details, but I'd be curious what the total fund size is. So when we see $25 million, that may sound like a lot, but it may be just a small percentage of that entire fund that's being committed to Bitcoin and Ether in this instance. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And you've been hearing sort of financial advisors and other people say, hey, these folks just need to get off zero, right? Going from 0 to 1% is going to be significant for a lot of these funds. And, I think people are again, like looking at the macroeconomic factors in the world right now and are thinking about places to store their wealth in a way that won't be deteriorated by inflation in the near, medium, and long term. So I think people are waking up to this, especially in the pension fund manager world. And I wouldn't be surprised if this became a non-story at some point, because it just becomes common, especially as we see more regulated products hit the market, whether it's a futures product, a spot market ETF, etc. It's going to be curious to see what people end up going toward. But I'll toss it back to you, Will.
Yeah, before I hand it over to Naomi, just to give some context, it's a $4 billion fund split between 66,000 different firefighters. To your point, I do think this would just become more common going forward. And I'm wondering how that holds up the price of Bitcoin going into the future. If we see these large allocations of capital into Bitcoin, into Ethereum, I would think that would kind of hold a basic price level for Bitcoin and Ethereum going forward. And we'd have less of these drastic bull bear cycles where we have like 90% downturns in the price. Maybe we only have like 50% downturns or even less, and becomes more like a stock as opposed to what we've been pretty used to with cryptocurrencies. Naomi, I'll throw it to you.
So pension funds are notorious, right? You have state agencies that are supposed to set aside money for pensions, but politicians tend to spend that money on appeasing other interest groups. You end up with this giant shortfall. So right now, if you look at FEE, they've got some statistics up there about how bad the shortfall is for these pension funds. So government-run pension plans just don't have the money to pay teachers, police officers, firefighters, other employees of the state. And the main reason for this is, first of all, because they're making projections about the stock market, making up a huge amount of the shortfall and saying like, oh, well, we're going to get 8% a year, because the stock market's going to do great. And they're relying on good performance. So when the stock market doesn't do well, they're missing out on a bunch of that money. But even if you get that 8% returns, they're underfunded. So it's a really dire situation. The fact that now people are looking towards Bitcoin, which is kind of keeping up with inflation and could be a way to mitigate all this disastrous policy going on in other areas, does seem kind of interesting. If they can't reach a compromise about whether to cut back these benefits or stop making promises that you can't keep or whatever, Politicians keep coming out with these things that never eventuate. People are relying on them. People think that when they retire, they're going to be getting a certain amount of money. They don't realize that these systems are bankrupt. So the fact that they're now finally looking to alternative options is kind of interesting, but the whole system is just completely corrupt and unsustainable.